So Matthew, I briefly covered this morning in the presentation the difference between training to learn and training to perform, and your interest in golf coaching evolved over the years into motor learning, and really this training to learn. How can golfers train effectively if they want to change movement patterns? So in the presentation we talked briefly about generalized motor patterns and synaptogenesis, but I didn't want to go down a road I didn't know so much about, so we kept it very brief. You just did your practical part of the certification outside to the people that have come to spend time with us today. Can you explain some of the stuff for the guys doing the certification online that you explained to them? So really just starting with what is training to learn and how you use it to stimulate synaptogenesis, and go from there.
Yeah, sure. So training to learn is a type of training that really is designed to stimulate synaptogenesis. The whole purpose of training to learn is for that process to happen, which induces deeper learning, and it's just a way for a golfer to learn to produce highly efficient and skilled movements, which is the golf swing ultimately. So, it's pretty simple. We're trying to get really just a few things to happen in training, which is spacing, variability, and challenge, and that really is the whole basis of training to learn.
So what is synaptogenesis? Can you go into what that is on a slightly deeper scale?
Yeah.
And then also why golfers that have an absence of spacing, variability, and challenge fail to create synaptogenesis.
Another special thanks to our sponsor, Gravity Fit, for helping us put on this event. 3 main reasons why you should purchase a Gravity Fit are: it's based on science and research, it helps activate the deep muscle system, and it absolutely helps players improve their golf swings and improve their performance out on the golf course. To find out more, visit www.gltgolfstore.com to purchase yours, or get in contact with GLT friend and partner Zach Parker. His email is below.
So I'll just go straight into synaptogenesis, and first we got to really understand that before we can really understand why we train this spacing, variability, and challenge. So synaptogenesis is the formation of synapses. And a synapse is, you may have heard of it yourself, and everybody else has heard of it as the connections in the brain, between neurons. And they're not actually connected. There's a small gap, very small gap, and that's what they call the synaptic cleft. So there's a small gap between there. And what we're trying to do is get as many of these connections to form so neurons can pass through, and it's the stimulation of a neuron firing through all these different connections in your brain, which go through your central nervous system out into the different parts of your body and in muscles to generate movement. So the stronger them connections are, and the more we stimulate the synaptogenesis process, the stronger they form, which again a lot of people know as myelin sheath. So these connections, they get this fatty type substance wrapped around them every time we stimulate synaptogenesis. So the more we stimulate this, the more fatty substance that gets wrapped around these connections, the quicker these neurons fire, the more precise they get. So I like to describe it as roads. So imagine a dirt track, and somebody walking or somebody riding a bicycle, or a car even, someone driving a car down a dirt track. It's very bumpy. The road is not really outlined. That's like a beginner golfer with a very weak connection. Then take, in Atlanta, the 75 South, 8 lanes, very well built. There's not really potholes in there. The lanes are outlined. That's like an elite performer. The connections are solidified, so cars can travel much faster down that one than if they were to travel down the dirt track. So again, synaptogenesis is the formation of synapses, which ultimately is a connection of of neurons in our brain, which helps us generate movement faster
So why
and more efficiently.
So why does spacing, variability, and challenge force synaptogenesis, and then give the opposing example of maybe practice without synaptogenesis? Without spacing, variability, and challenge, why does that not lead to synaptogenesis, and what does it lead to?
Yeah, so at least the blood flow.
Okay.
Every golfer that's out there today, they're hitting golf balls in this block sort of fashion, 7-iron, one after another, hitting down the range. They're stimulating blood flow. They're not stimulating synaptogenesis. The brain needs to be challenged. It needs to be engaged. It needs to constantly be thinking of new solutions, not just given the same problem to give the same solution over and over again. Our brains are lazy, and I think we can all agree that human beings become lazy, right? So it's basically a lazy type of practice, and so what happens is your brain shuts off. It looks for quick fixes. It seeks out the easiest way to do something. So the easiest way to practice is to just stand in one place and beat balls. And unfortunately, that has a negative effect on us learning.
Special thanks to Capto for sponsoring the event. Their putting analysis software is incredible. If you haven't used it or if you haven't seen it, we suggest you check them out. It's lightweight, portable, easy to use. Best part is you can capture in context, just like we talked about within this certification. Make sure you go to www.gltgolfstore.com to check out Capto and purchase yours today.
You know, because when we go out on the golf course provides all the necessary requirements for synaptogenesis. That's why if you actually just go and play golf over and over again, you'll get better than if you were to just go and beat balls. Hence the whole, I can't take my range game to the golf course. If you just start on the golf course, you're engaged in an activity that challenges you. It spaces these shots out because you don't hit 5 drives. You hit a drive and then a 7-iron, then a putt or whatever. Not quite the case for me, but it's spaced out. There's challenge, it's spaced out, and there's variability because you're not just hitting 7-iron. You've got to hit an array of clubs, an array of shots.
So then that environment forces you to be engaged.
Exactly.
Forces synaptogenesis, forces you to learn, and you'll eventually change your movement patterns.
Yes.
But the golf range, as we all agree, and as I said in the presentation, it's going nowhere. No. So how do we practice on the golf range to avoid just getting blood flow to our brain and create synaptogenesis? And you just gave a couple of examples of training to learn circuits that you do with different levels of players. You just gave them to the attendees of the certification. Now can you give a couple of examples to the people that are doing the certification online?
Yeah, I think just to preface this, Tim Lee said to us and said to me a long time ago, rather than think of taking your range game to the golf course, think of trying to bring the golf course to the range. So he spun it on his head. And every example I gave Tim, he always suggested, well, if you had, for example, I remember a student a few years ago who was practicing with a 9-iron, and I was talking to Tim about this practice session, and he said, well, what would the next thing be on the golf course after that 9-iron shot? He said it would probably be on the green hitting a putt. So I said, is there a putting green nearby? I said, yeah, it's about 15 feet behind us. I said, we'll go and putt. So the whole idea with circuits is just like if you're going to go in the gym and train different muscles, you won't just sit on a bench press and do chest presses for 45 minutes. Never got mine anywhere. So you kind of you mix it up, right? So we ideally, and you want me to give an example for everybody, right?
Yeah.
So go to the range, and let's say you just have a range, no short game area, no putting green. Pull out a driver and hit a tee shot, and then pull out a 7-iron and hit an approach shot, and then pull out a wedge and hit a chip. It's very unlikely that you don't have a practice putting green, a chipping green, or one that can be used for both, and a range. So use that as an opportunity to hit a drive and then walk to the putting green. If it's down a hill, just like ours here, the chipping green, chipping area, you have to walk down the hill. Good, because then there's space between the shots.
But if I'm working on my golf swing, say I'm working on loading into the right side or getting open at impact, they're kind of like popular things, or getting my wrist like this, I don't know what any of this means, but they're the things that tend to be worked on. There's the thought that I have to get my reps in.
Yes, which you do.
Okay, so, am I thinking of the mechanical movement while I'm hitting my driver, then hitting my 7-iron, and then I'm going to go and chip, or am I where if I'm training to learn, where is my focus?
Well, I think the principles stay the same. The principles of spacing, variability, and challenge, they remain the same whether it's for the whole game or whether you're working on increasing the hinge of the golf club on the way back. I don't know where that came from, but I see people trying to do this with a swing guard. So let's say you're trying to increase this wrist angle on the way back, then great. The only way that that's going to transfer into a competitive environment and stand under pressure, as people would call it, is if you practice it in an environment or create an environment which challenges synaptogenesis. So you would have one particular station, one particular area that would be solely focused on making this wrist hinge. You would video it. You would use all of the tools at your disposal that people have nowadays, but you would, if you're a really good golfer, you'd have fewer reps of doing this one exercise, and then you'd move to something else, and it can be 3 feet to the side of you if it needs to be, and work on the rotation of your torso or whatever else there is, but the focus stays on that, not the wrist hinge. A station should be designed for whatever the focus is going to be in that area. And then I'd always encourage doing something completely different, because to learn, you have to forget something to then try to learn it.
Yeah.
So if you potentially give your brain the chance to forget something that you did 3 stations ago, then when you come back to it, it only strengthens the learning, it only strengthens the connections in the brain to then show up later on when you have to come back to it. So, multiple stations, one clear focus, and I see a lot of people with doing multiple things in one place. Your brain's like a circuit board. There'll be so when you're thinking about movement, you can't be thinking about multiple movements because there's a conflict in your brain. So you'll start to cross things over and funky moves come. So if you're going to one station for this wrist hinge, move on to the next station. It can be for whatever you want. Move on to another station with another focus and keep it going.
And if I'm doing 5 repetitions at each station, and I'm starting to get this move, so I'm all excited, coach, I'm getting it. Should I continue to do 5 at each station?
No.
What should I do?
Make it harder. Again, that's where the challenge comes in. So reduce the number of reps, or make it harder. Make the parameters of whatever you're working on harder. There are tools like K-Motion, Body Track, Cap Toe for putting. All of these incredible devices have an ability to make the parameters tighter and harder for you. If you're trying to roll a putt, maybe the parameters of whatever the face and path or the start line, whatever it is, that coaches when it comes to making things more difficult, coaches have this ability to just think of stuff on the fly. And I think, and you've probably seen it when you're working with golf coaches, they have an incredible ability to know the golfer that's in front of them and just make something on the fly that fits that golfer. So just make the parameters harder, reduce the number of repetitions, and increase the difficulty.
Special thanks to Capto for sponsoring the event. Their putting analysis software is incredible. If you haven't used it or if you haven't seen it, we suggest you check them out. It's lightweight, portable, easy to use. Best part is you can capture in context, just like we talked about within this certification. Make sure you go to www.gltgolfstore.com to check out Capto and purchase yours today.
So ultimately, for people watching, if it was a tour player working on their wrist hinge, not that I would ever believe a tour player should be working on their wrist hinge, but if a tour player was working on their wrist hinge, it might go 2 repetitions, hit 1 shot, go hole a putt.
Yeah.
If an average club golfer is working on their wrist hinge, it might be 5 repetitions, hit 1 shot, back, 5 repetitions, hit 1 shot. So the circuits are shifted and changed, like you showed out there to the people doing the certification. If you want to train to learn, the optimal challenge is what we're trying to get. But that doesn't mean that spacing and variability are absent. They're still going to be there.
Yeah, they all work on a continuum.
Got
so
it.
spacing is, a lot of spacing, a little spacing, and the golf coach is the one that can adjust the frequency of that. They can move spacing down here. They can move any to whatever they think is giving the person in front of them the optimum challenge.
So ultimately, when I said this morning, a way to induce deeper learning is to create cognitive stress, forgetting, and then being forced to remember. I think you've put it nicely with that phrase. To forget is to remember. You always have to be challenging your brain, and it's the challenge to your brain through spacing, variability, and the optimal challenge point that will create synaptogenesis. For those golfers that are just standing there hitting ball after ball after ball, synaptogenesis is absent and it's just blood flow.
Correct.
Awesome. We have a well-watched YouTube video of you coaching, explaining a circuit that you're setting up for a college golfer. So unfortunately, because the people doing the certification didn't get the opportunity to actually see you coach, we'll tag that video to the end of this. And for more videos like that, to see Matthew coach and set up training to learn and training to perform circuits, you can check out our YouTube channel, Game Like Training. Thanks, man.